Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Gotta Get Running. I'm Phil Hargis. It's good to see you guys again. Thanks for tuning in. The weather is starting to clear up here. We don't have as many cold days as we had, for this winter and everything. This is like prime training weather. The 5Ks are starting, the 8Ks are starting. And one of the premier spring races we have here in Washington, D.C. is the Cherry Blossom 10 miler. We might have a guest for you on the show later on to talk about the Cherry Blossom 10-mile race in a little more detail. But for right now, we got Chris Farley. Chris is my co-host. Chris, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you, Phil. Yeah, it is. The weather's turning. I'm running the 4 quarts full miler this weekend. Are you running it as well?
I wanted to get into that race, but it's sold out, man. So I'm just going to come by and watch or something.
I think I can get you in. Well, like you said, the races are starting to heat up here, and I'm very excited to have Phil Stewart here. He is the race director of the Cherry Blossom 10 miler. Most notably, you got a number of things that you do in the running community, but most notably, the race director for the Cherry Blossom 10 mile. Thanks for joining us, Phil.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, good. Well, I wanted to get right into it, and let's learn a little bit about who Phil Stewart is. You were a competitive runner. You ran the Cherry Blossom road race before you directed. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm a Washington, D.C. native. Actually went to Wilson High School in Northwest Washington and started running there. My father wanted me to be a tennis player, but never got the backhand down and started running and enjoyed it. And then went off to school in Minnesota and came back after school and started running in road races here. It was a very different environment. I graduated in '72. It was definitely pre-boom days when you come back, and the D.C. Roadrunner races were the only races on the map, and you would get that schedule, and it was like gold. And every week there would be this band of the same 25 or 40 people. They'd be in Greenbelt one week and Annandale the week after that in American University, and just started running in those races. And then actually old Washington Sports Club, which then became the Washington Running Club, hooked up with them, and there were a group of us, and I think, like happens so many times, when you get into a group, good things start to happen. And trained, and my time started coming down, and started running in races, and then I was fifth in the Credit Union Cherry Blossom.
What year was that?
That was 1977, actually.
Okay.
Fifth place that year, and I remember the friend of mine who was the race director, he gave me the number 2 the following year, and I didn't quite live up to my seed that year, but it was a lot of pressure,
So that was in '77. Was that the first Cherry Blossom 10-mile run, or?
Started in 1973, actually. The first year there were about 141 runners. It was called the Acacia Cherry Blossom Classic, and it was a big thing back then. In fact, it was really the first race that I can remember that ever had a title sponsor, so that was a big deal. And then we went from Acacia, then Perrier picked it up for a few years. After Perrier went to Nike, then Northern Telecom had a 10-year run, and then the credit unions have been the title sponsor since 2002. But anyway, it was very different back in 1973, and there is now today only one runner left, a fellow named Ben Beach, who lives in Bethesda, and he is the sole person who has run all 38 times. He is entered this year for the 39th time, and he's kind of a guy who likes streaks because he also has completed the Boston Marathon every year for the last 43 years.
Wow. And speaking of the Boston Marathon, you also ran in the Boston Marathon in what year?
1975.
1975. And tell us a little bit about that and what place you came in there.
Well, that was the first year that Bill Rogers won the race, and it was a year that was notable for, had a nice tailwind that year. I was a 2:26 marathoner going in, caught the tailwind, ran really the race of my life. I mean, it was something that I never thought I would do. Crossed the finish line 2:19:58, so it's kind of like running a 3:59.9 mile or something. But that got me into the '76 Olympic trials. So anyway, got a chance to compete in the trials that year, and then really it was the following year when, along with a couple of running buddies of mine, we started running Times magazine, and then towards the late '70s. It's interesting. Everybody says, maybe you can relate to this, but everybody would say back at the time, you know, isn't it great you're combining your vocation and your avocation, and, you know, you start this running magazine and it's going to be great for your running career. Well, all of our running careers went straight, died.
I can relate.
Died. Wasn't, I mean, it's great to be involved in the sport and to be able to stay around it, but it was not a panacea for the, for our running careers.
So that takes us through some of the earlier years, and then I did want to mention he is very well versed in a lot of different hats that Phil wears, but he was somewhat of a photographer and took a famous picture in 1979. Tell us about that.
Well, I was at Running Times magazine at the time, and we heard that there was this race that was going to take place at Camp David, and it was the worst kept secret in the world that President Carter was going to run in the race. And so I packed my camera, went up and ran in the race. And it was interesting because it was planned as a media event, and they had official photographers there. But I was the only person who had both a media pass and I entered the race.
And a race number.
And so I literally was running right alongside President Carter when he collapsed, and I got the only, I mean, it was a photographer's dream. I felt bad for Carter because he was, you know, out there relating to the people and, you know, just, and, you know, he just pushed himself too hard and collapsed, and, you know, I got the only pictures that became famous, and even to this day, within the last year, I get inquiries about people wanting to use the pictures. One of the interesting things is that I maintained that I would only allow the pictures to be used in legitimate journalistic news purposes. And when the 1980 election came around, I actually got contacted by Republican political action committees because the picture literally...
It's always been going on.
Yeah, that's right. Very Washington thing. But the pictures became emblematic of the collapse of the Carter presidency. You consider when he collapsed in the race, the interest rates were 15%. The hostages were being held hostage in Iran, and so they felt that this was... you know, they wanted to use this photo to say, you know, as the president is collapsing, so is his presidency. And I refused to sell it to him. So I felt good about that. Mad Magazine wanted to buy it. I didn't sell it to Mad Magazine. I don't know why they wanted it, but I didn't figure it was going to be for a good purpose. So
I'm curious about this race. Was this like a race that was like open to the public? Or was
it actually was.
Yeah,
it actually, but it had been, again, they weren't going to announce publicly that Jimmy Carter was going to run the race, but they let it be known enough so that it circulated. And there were probably, I don't know, 300-400 runners in it, and it was held in the Camp David compound. And anyway, you literally went over a mountain there, and President Carter went in saying he was going to set a personal best, which was a crazy course to try and do that on, and he just ran too hard.
It's probably his only 10K, or was he an established runner prior to that?
He had run, I think maybe he'd run 1 or 2 races before then, but this was, anyway, he wanted to make a statement, but it was not, it wasn't the right track.
The poor guy. I mean, everybody can relate to somebody, you know, just total exhaustion at the end of the race, and it becomes emblematic of his presidency.
Hold on, what was his time?
I know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm afraid it was a DNF.
Oh, it was a DNF.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, couldn't quite get there.
Well, moving on to the Cherry Blossom Road race, you took over in 1991. Tell us a little bit about the start of that.
Well, the last year I ran the race, I believe, was 1980, and then I got involved in the organizing committee. And actually, for a while, I was the announcer at the race, and I served on the race committee. And then a longtime friend of mine was actually directing the race, so we co-directed it for a few years. A fellow named Jeff Darman, who actually does the race now with the Capitol Challenge with all the congressmen and senators in it that takes place every May here. But anyway, so I took it over from Jeff the first year that Nortel Networks became the title sponsor.
Right.
But when you take it over, really what you do is you end up being at the, you know, I mean, there's a tremendous race committee that's involved. Right now we have about 40 members on the race committee, and you know, like any group, one person does the water stops, and you know, somebody else does the registration and the expo and so forth. But the committee gets together meets about 5 times a year as a full committee, and just anyway, they're just an incredibly dedicated group. And they work hard on it. They're all volunteers.
I'm sure, yeah, and I'm sure it takes
task.
an army of people to do it. It's 10 miles that covers through Virginia and D.C.?
It's all in D.C.
All in D.C. Okay, tell us a little about the route.
Well, actually, I guess technically when you do the loop on the far end of Memorial Bridge.
That's what I was thinking. When you head towards Arlington Cemetery, it maybe touches Virginia a little bit.
Touches Virginia. But we're all on National Park Service land. And one of the things that you learn in the race organizing business in the Washington area is there are lots of different jurisdictions.
Right.
You've got Park Service Division, you got Park Service, you got DC Police, you got Capitol Police, you got everything. Fortunately, our course just all falls on National Park Service land, which really streamlines it so that we're just dealing with one permitting authority, so it makes it easy. But certainly, and I guess it's been 4 or 5 years now. You know, we started and finished in West Potomac Park for a long time, and as the race grew in size, we really felt that access to public transportation was key, and so that was why we wanted to, I mean, besides the fact that, I mean, what could be more all-American than starting in the shadow of the Washington Monument, but we also wanted to be close to the metro, and when we moved over there, of course, now we're just a quarter of a mile away, and the race actually foots the bill for the metro to open 2 hours early, because ordinarily it doesn't open till 7 on Sunday, so we open it up at 5 o'clock, and if I can put in a plug on April 3rd, take Metro, take Metro, that's what we want you to do.
So the runners who are watching this, who are running the race, they can expect a flat and fast course?
Oh yeah, yeah. We sort of chuckle actually because we get some people who aren't familiar with the course. They'll send us an email and say, you know, can you give us an elevation map of the course? And I'll say, hold out your hand here. You know, there it is, right
just like
there.
That piece of paper.
Piece
right
of
there.
paper, right. It is. I mean, you know, you hit a little tiny hill going up off Independence Avenue up to Lincoln Memorial, and then actually, you know, probably what we call Heartbreak Hill is right at 9 3/4 miles when you know, you come off of Haynes Point. You're coming up. I guess it's Raoul Wallenberg Place just before the finish. So, but
it does seem like a monster after coming off.
I think if you're having a bad day,
it could be.
Yeah. Monsters rear their head any place.
So you can only allow 15,000 people. How many people apply for this race?
Well, you know, for quite a few years we did first come first serve, and it was sort of exponential in terms of the amount of time that it took for it to fill up. I mean, first it was 6 days, then it was 4 days, and it was 25 hours, and when we got down, so it was filling up in, you know, 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Wow.
I really felt at the time that it wasn't fair, that if we had a teacher who couldn't get their break until 10:30, then all of a sudden they couldn't get into a race. If you had a business meeting, you couldn't get into a race. And you know, quite frankly, you know, we had server overload, so people would get caught in the server and they wouldn't know whether they were in or out, and they'd panic and wouldn't know whether they could, you know, should enter again. All of that really went out the window when we went with the lottery. Although I'll tell you the one piece of human nature that you learn, particularly the first year that we did the lottery system, what you learn is that people don't like whatever system they didn't get in. Right. So the people who didn't get in with the first come first serve, they hated it. The people who didn't get in through the lottery, they hated it. And it's like, you know, I guess that's human nature. But certainly, I felt like the lottery was a lot more equitable system. I mean, people basically, you have 10 days, you can register for the lottery at your leisure, there's no rush, and you know, and then we do an electronic drawing. I mean, you know, virtually 98% of our entries now are electronic, actually. So we do a drawing out of that. It's very fair. I don't have people who are caught in the, you know, caught in the server, and I know the wear and tear on me. I mean, the last year we did the first come first serve system, I personally answered close to 1,000 emails from from people. I mean, one of the things that the race really prides itself on is good customer service. Really, that's what I call it. You know, people send us an email, they will get a response, and I can tell because so often they're surprised that they get a response. And I think the thing that you discover in this is that you can even be telling somebody something that you can be giving them bad news, like, I'm sorry, you can't get into the race is full. You tell them that an hour after they sent the email, they'll feel very different about it than if you tell them that a week after they sent the email. And so you learn, okay, maybe you can't be all things to all people, but you just be responsive, and people appreciate that.
It's really refreshing to hear a live voice. Did you ever entertain the idea of having like qualification standards instead of a lottery system, or anything like that? Or?
Not like the Boston Marathon does. I mean, we do have qualifications for what we call our seeded runners. We have time standards for different age groups where you will get a guaranteed entry into the race. So if you're, a 50-year-old runner and you've run, sub 66 minutes. Don't hold me to that. In case there are any 50-year-olds out there who are wondering. That's right. It's somewhere in that approximate range of. Then you can get into the race. I mean, one of the things also that we have felt committed to. And I know we're going to get a chance to talk about the prize money and the elite athletes, and that's a very important part of the race. But we also really don't want the local runners to feel like they're being neglected. Like this is just all the big guys who come to town, and the next week they've moved on somewhere else. I mean, we want this to have a local race feel to it, and so as such, we like to give recognition to our leading age group runners in all the age divisions. So. We have a time standard for every 5-year age group, and if you better that time, then you don't have to go through the lottery process. You get a guaranteed entry. In fact, one of the things that we're doing this year for the first time is that we're going to have a local team competition, and we're actually going to give some prize money to the top local team. So we're hoping that'll. I mean, we really want to see the running store teams going head to head with some of the running clubs teams, and. So we thought put up a little bit of prize money and have them go at it.
So you touched on the prize money for the elites. Can you talk a little bit about the elites, because it's a world record type course that you're running?
Well, it is. I mean, there have been a lot of records set over the course, world records. I mean, 1995 actually was a great year. We had both the men's and women's world records set literally the same day, and it was just tremendously exciting. Awesome. But the course, I mean, the flat course, the runners like it. It's a good time of year, and so going all the way back to the beginning of the race, I mean, we've always felt like the elite competition was an important ingredient of our event, and I think in a way the race represents really the one time of the year when you get your Olympic medalists, your world champions. I mean, in some ways, it is what makes our event unique. On the running circuit, is that this is a time when there's big money for these elite athletes. And I hear from the runners, I mean, a lot of times people say, well, they don't know who the elite athletes are, and it's, a lot of runners from Kenya and Ethiopia and stuff like that. But I also hear from runners, I mean, particularly on our course, which has a lot of out and back portions, and they are just in awe, and they may not know the name of that runner who's coming back in the other direction, but they respect, and they just can't believe. I mean, it's almost like ballet how fast they move. I mean, it's a different it's a different breed, and they're inspired by that, and I feel like that's an important component of the race.
And I can tell you, as a middle of the packer, that I'm one of those people that sees the elites coming back to me regularly during these races, and the support from the runners during that portion of the races, they're like, yeah, you're doing great, keep going after it. I mean, they're cheering them on. I mean, they're just flying by, and it's like one big blur, but they're doing it. Man. And the middle of the packers do love to see them, like you just said. So that's really enjoyable for us.
I mean, we always figure. I mean, Washington, certainly you can't get more of an international city than Washington D.C. And so we like the whole concept of bringing runners in from all over the world to run on the streets of the nation's capital.
Tell me about. Sorry, Phil. Tell me about run picks that we talked a little about the middle of the Packers.
Well, one of the things that we like to do each year is to come up with something new, something that we haven't done before. One of the things we're excited about this year is that we're working with a company called Run Picks. Actually, they're out of Australia, which is funny because when we call them late in the day, we have to do a lot of coordinating with the 18-hour difference. Oh, we getting you up here? Well, no, it's 6 a.m., but they'll talk to us. But anyway, basically, it's going to be a graphical interface for the runners where after the race, you can go on and go onto the computer. You'll be able to log on to the site, and you'll be able to actually see a schematic of the finish line, and you'll be able to roll your mouse over where you finished and see who finished around you. You'll get a lot of other statistics, like you can see where you were on the course when the lead female came across or the lead male. You know, I don't know whether you'll feel good about that. I don't know just how far back you were, but it's I mean, the use of the transponder chips basically really has revolutionized the data streams that you can get from the race. I mean, anywhere you put a mat down, you can get a data stream from, and so it opens up a lot of possibilities for tracking runners along the course.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's super important to do innovative stuff. That's really neat. Other things that you guys do, I know you raise a lot of money, and the Children's Miracle Network, maybe you can touch on that.
Sure. Since the credit unions became the title sponsor in 2002, they were very committed to the fundraising aspect of the race, and so we chose Children's Miracle Network as our charity. And since then, since 2002, we've raised $4.5 million for Children's Miracle Network. One of the things that everybody likes about Children's Miracle Network is that Children's Miracle Network is actually a consortium of 170 children's hospitals all around the country. And so if we have a runner who comes into the race, or they also use this event to leverage fundraising through credit unions all around the country. So if a credit union from California raises money, then that money goes to a children's hospital, Children's Miracle Network affiliate that's in California. So rather than feeling like you're coming from California, you're raising money and it's staying here in Washington, the money's literally going back to the community.
Wow.
So over 10 years of the credit unions being the title sponsor, we're at $4.5 million, and what their motto is for this year is that they want to go over $5 million in 10 years of sponsoring the race, and I think I think that we'll make it. So, and a lot of the runners, you know, again, using the model that you know, a lot of races, a lot of the runners themselves are going out and getting involved in fundraising activities. So it's a very, very important aspect of the race.
So if I'm at home and I want to see the race, is there opportunity to do that?
Better. This is the best year ever for that, because one of the other innovations that we're doing this year is that we're going to have a live streaming broadcast of the race. So we have a company called Runner Space coming in out of Eugene, Oregon. Actually, a couple of University of Oregon runners who got this thing started. And so you actually will be able on race day to be able to click onto your PC. We're actually going to have 3 cameras. So we will have one on the lead men, one on the lead women, and then a roving camera. Great. So you can either watch all 3 simultaneously. You can click and watch just the men or just the women. You can rotate among the 3 cameras. We're also going to be setting up some jumbotrons down there, so there'll be some broadcast for the spectators and everything. So we're really trying to have it all happen in real time as far as the broadcast goes.
But we all know Chris won't be in bed on that morning, though. He'll probably
no, I'm going to be running. I'm hoping to get that 3rd camera on me. So what does, I like to ask our race directors when they come in, what does Phil Stewart do the day of the race?
I don't get a lot of sleep.
I'm sure, right.
We have a sponsor elite athlete dinner the night before, where we get to recognize the sponsors, introduce the elite athletes. Then one of the other traditions that we have, we get tremendous support from the U.S. Park Police. So we always have a little party for the Park Police the night before the race in the hotel. So it's, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep. I'll be out there about, I don't know, 3:30 in the morning. Wow. They start closing the streets down at 4. Right. And one of the things, because the race takes place during the National Cherry Blossom Festival and during the peak time of the blossoms, and the one thing, I think the word is pretty much out on the street now, that the peak for the blossoms this year is April 1 to 3. So we are right in the middle of that peak season, which will certainly make it beautiful. Right. It also means that there are a lot of tourists in town to see the blossoms, and so they need to balance the needs of the runners with the tourists. So we need to to really be out of there by 11 o'clock. So, so if you're going to be running 10 miles, and we encourage people still to do this, if you entered the 10 mile and you don't think you can maintain a 14-minute per mile pace, drop us an email. We'll let you switch to the 5K. So we do have a 5K that takes place. We have a 5K, absolutely. And it's grown. It's got 1,500 runners.
Wow.
In its own right, but again, it's more designed as a fun run and walk, and so I always joke because we literally encourage people. If you can't run the 10 miles, then run the 5K, and we even will encourage them to do that on race day. So what happens is that it's the only race I know of that has more finishers than it has starters.
Right.
Because all the people who shift from the 10 mile, they just come over and jump in the 5K. And we also have a little kids run, half-mile kids run that takes place on the monument grounds. That's free. There's no lottery for that. There's no lottery for that. You can simply show up on race day. That starts at 8:40. So we're.
And how many kids do you get to turn out for those races?
It's about 200 or 300 kids come out for us, but they get, what greater inspiration can there be than running in the shadow of the Washington Monument, and it's a lot of fun.
It's the greatest.
And quickly, the talk about the Cherry Blossom Festival and how you guys relate and what's the importance of that to you guys?
We're one of the participating events. I mean, the festival itself is, I believe it goes over 16 days and it has a variety of sports and cultural events. So we are actually one of the participating events. And it certainly is nice to be associated with the festival. And certainly, particularly over the last 10 years or so, the festival has really gained in international visibility, brings a lot of people to town and stuff like that. So we certainly like being part of it.
That's great.
It's a great way to see the cherry blossoms. It's the best way to see Washington, D.C. is to get out and run in this race. Just get in the lottery. I guess if you can't get into the lottery, you can volunteer and then get in the race next year as well.
That's right. All of our volunteers, you volunteer this year, you have a transferable guaranteed entry next year. We're particularly looking for volunteers for our green team, actually. One of the things that we're doing is that we are striving to get certified by the Council for Responsible Sport. We worked on this initiative last year. We're picking it up this year, but we still need some more green team volunteers. So if you're out there, if you've got a group of people particularly, go on the website, cherryblossom.org. You can get us and send us an email. We'll sign you up for our green team.
So this race is going down. It's going down on Sunday, April 3rd at 7:40 a.m. for the Cherry Blossom, the Credit Union Cherry Blossom 10-mile run. There's also a 5K and the half-mile kids run. We have Phil Stewart, the race director of the Cherry Blossom run. Phil, thank you very much for joining us on the show today. Phil, and Chris, good to see you again.
Yep,
and again, thanks a lot. Have a great race.
Okay, well, we're looking forward to it. Blossoms at their peak, perfect day. Again, we call the race the Runner's Rite of Spring, and that's what we want it to be for everyone.
And we will see you guys next time on Gotta Get Running. Goodbye, everybody.